Before we begin, thank you very much to Crabs in a Trench Coat Pretending to be a Human. Oh my god, I would not mind shouting out people every single day if you came up with goofy things like that for me to shout out. So thank you very much for the support, means the world to me. The Patreon is way more important than you realize. There's a lot going on in my life and it's helped a lot. So thank you guys for the support. It is genuinely what keeps me going every single day and is what's going to maybe make May like a 2 video a day month. I can't believe I'm going to attempt, but we're going to try. But thank you guys so much for the support. So, like I said, May is a double video month because we're doing the Beast Machines episode reviews this month because it is Beast Machines here on the YouTube channel. And let it not be said that I'm not a fair critic. You know, I went in through Beast Machines and I realized this is going to be a lot more negative than I imagined it. Because I have better memories of the show than what I was presented with upon rewatching it. So, we're going to balance it out. I've got other Beast Machines projects in mind, and not all of them are on the downside of things. So, today, we're going to be discussing the 10 best toys that came out in Beast Machines. Because, yes, every toy line has 10 best of something. Keeping in mind, this is just one humble reviewer's opinion. Your idea of what the best ones are going to be vastly different than mine. But I do want to show just a little bit of fairness toward this series before we get into the meat of the episode reviews where I start getting really, really harsh. But let us begin, and we're going to start in the usual spot, number 10, with a toy that I felt like came out in the wrong color scheme, but beyond that, really didn't do anything wrong, if we're really being fair about it, and that's going to be Obsidian. Now, Obsidian was a basic class figure, so he's going to be a much more simplified Vehicon. However, as far as being show accurate goes, he's a lot closer than a lot of Beast Machines toys came. Like I said, the color scheme is the only thing kind of off. Dark blues would have been the go-to for Obsidian, but this is Hasbro, who were like super weird about releasing toys in certain colors at the certain times, so there just wasn't enough green on the shelf, so Obsidian became green. For whatever reason the color scheme exists, to be fair, it's not a bad looking color scheme even if it isn't accurate, and the toy itself does have a lot of upsides. You can look left and right with the cockpit of the Harrier, the Harrier, and you can also you can also stand him on one unileg to emulate his like floating in the show, or split it into 2 legs in order to have standard normal articulation. Lots of little tricks for a toy like this. Oh, and the rotors fire off as missiles. So, like, yeah, there's a lot of little things going on in what, at the time, was a $5 figure. I know, price points are depressing these days, but that's the truth of it. So, for one of the smallest entries into Beast Machines, it definitely benefited from being a year 2 toy, and the experience they had of creating something much closer to what was supposed to be represented from the show. It's not all going to be TV characters, however. There are a few entries in here that I do feel were worth mentioning, even though they didn't actually appear in the cartoon. And one of those is going to be Dive Bomb. Now, for starters, I already love the idea that you have this kind of like semi-skeletal Pteranodon Quetzalcoatl. Like, I'm not going to try and pretend I know dinosaurs. How about that? How about that? How about I not? I know this is not technically a dinosaur. I know that. Okay, so a prehistoric lizard bird has a really interesting look to him. Like, he's very thin and gangly in the robot mode, but the toy wears it well. And the beast mode itself, I think, is actually really, really cool. I like how they've managed to get the wings pretty much functionally out of the way by splitting them across multiple sections of the robot mode. It works really, really well. And overall, like, yeah, it's just a cool looking figure. I mean, I even like the oranges and blues. They're kind of representative of Beast Machine style color scheme, and it's not a really bad one. Nice figure. I happen to like it quite a bit. There's also a strange little bit of trivia where there's parts of this toy that might actually be influenced from an old anime movie called Vampire Hunter D. Go look it up on TF Wiki. It's kind of weird what went into this toy to make this design. But for what it is, I thought it was one of the more interesting choices for Beast Machines, a line that didn't really have any kind of prehistoric animals, say for a subline, to begin with, much less one that's done in an interesting way. It's going to come as no surprise that a lot of these toys on the list are going to be Vehicons. They were largely considered to be the better of the toys from the series, and they were generally more solid and more well built than the Maximals. You also didn't have things like clear plastic to worry about on most of those. You had chrome to worry about, which brings us to Jetstorm. So the Ultra Class Jetstorm was actually a really cool toy. It's really big and hefty, like one of the bigger jet transformers they had ever produced. So that already was actually really cool back then. On top of that, you had a lot of extra features. You had electronics, you had firing missiles up the shoulders, you had a really fairly well-articulated robot for the time, and most importantly, you had the articulated neck in the jet mode. The most important thing when it comes to a Jetstorm toy, and it did include it. It actually pulled it off. You had the unileg mode too, and then the individual legs, so I always liked when Beast Machines toys gave you the option like that. Yeah, it's a fun figure. Now, the only reason why it's not higher on this list is the aforementioned chrome problem. It is by far the worst sufferer of that really cheap, bad chrome that was plaguing some of the Transmetal toys, and then even toys into the 2000s, where it flaked off so easily. Even if you didn't open the toy, it just cracked and flaked. So, the cosmetic problem aside, it's a really solid toy and really cool to mess with if you're a kid and just wanted this gigantic laser firing jet. And really, who doesn't want a giant laser firing jet in their lives? Another theme of the Beast Machines line is the second go around doing it better than the first. Since the toy line was infamous for all of its inaccurate toys, a lot of times they saw the other size classes as an opportunity to correct some mistakes and release something a little bit more what we expect. Case in point, the motorcycle drone, which actually gave us a better incarnation of thrust than the original figure. It loses all of this excess junk that was hanging off the back of the original's robot mode. A lot of the kind of clutter was gone. In was this super sleek, efficient machine that I'm sure Vehicon Megatron would deeply appreciate. It also had the unileg mode. It can stand on one wheel thanks to its arms, more precisely its arms with its missiles being long enough. But unlike some characters that rely on wheels to stand up, this one has, as you see, an optional leg mode where it acts much more like a standard figure. Now, function-wise, this one isn't quite as robust. You've got firing gimmicks and little things that his arms do, but he's kind of limited figure-wise. But he's fun and clean as a toy. To be fair, I could have put the tank drone toy here in too. It's another basic class figure that basically does the exact same thing. It's a tiny version of a large figure that more accurately represents the character from the cartoon than the original version. That said, I always had a soft spot for this one because I felt like it had a harder time to make the vehicle mode and robot mode work together. But it does a nice job, and as a tiny little desktop-sized thrust, it's not bad at all. Here's a personal favorite of mine that I really wish became something more, and alas, it just became something to fill out the line. But it's one of my favorite designs from Beast Machines, even if I can acknowledge there are better toys, and that is Spy Streak. I love this figure. It feels very appropriate for a mini-con to forego standard arms completely in favor of just ludicrous weaponry, whether that is this massive missile launcher that is bigger than his body, or this gigantic whatever. Do you want to say it's a claw? I want to say it's the coolest railgun I've ever seen. Whatever your imagination said that weapon was, it's a fierce toy and really nice. Like, because it's using so much of that jet bulk to create his gigantic weapons, the rest of the body is maintained this very sleek, striking appearance. It's a really sharp design. Now, color scheme wise, he could be better, and he has better color schemes. I personally think the RID version, Night Cruise, is a better figure overall for having a nicer paint job. However, it's still not bad, and figure wise itself, it really does just strike as such a really good minicon, not only for its solid, really sharp looking robot mode, but also just how dedicated it is to its heavy firepower. Something I'm sure Megatron could appreciate. Again. Out of the basics now, let's talk some standard-sized Vehicons. In particular, we're going to be talking about a Mega-class Vehicon. I kind of mentioned him a little bit before, but I do admit he makes the list here too. Let's talk a little bit about Tankor. Tankor is another one of those late 90s, early 2000s figures that had a lot of little gimmicks thrown in to make the toy a little bit more palatable for kids. But overall, still really, really nice. They had a good idea in not trying to replicate the head on the robot mode becomes the head in the vehicle mode. Instead, they let it be two separate entities, and it comes across with a much cooler look as a result. The overall design obviously does not really represent Tankor from the show. It is much more standard in Transformer design. That does not make it bad, however. It just makes it a little bit odd. Combine that with this really menacing attack mode where it's just claws and grinders going up the center of the tank, like it's literally trying to drag its enemies in and grind them to a pulp, keeping in mind its enemies are organic partially. It's pretty brutal when you think about it. Now, obviously the big thing here is the color scheme is completely off, and I don't even know if Japan tried to make this color scheme work. I think they just stuck to the basic tank drone for their Tankor. But nevertheless, it's not a bad toy at all. Again, it's big and solid, which is something that a lot of Beast Machines toys lacked. And it makes a toy like this stand out a lot more. And when you put some really fun little gimmicky features in that don't really hamper the toy, you got something a lot better. One more for this run of Vehicons, and this time I had to avoid accidentally doubling up on the same character, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and put a slightly different version. Let's talk about the Sonic Attack Drone, or what we kind of decided was going to be our Jetstorm when we bought it and just like pretended it was the normal one. So, the deluxe version of Jetstorm doesn't have the neck thing that is important to Jetstorm. However, the toy itself is far more solid and what I believe to be far more fun. Yes, I like the big size of the Ultra class, and yeah, I kind of like the gimmicks that they threw in with that one, but there is just something in me that's always going to prefer the sleek and the toned down gimmicks in order to make a more, satisfying robot Transformer experience, and that's what the deluxe Jetstorm was for me. I experienced that toy as Universe Skywarp, and I acknowledge it's a really fun, solid deluxe class Transformer with a really nice little transformation to it and a solid look overall. Again, features the unileg, features separate legs if you want them, features firing missiles, and overall, I think just a nicer color scheme than the standard deluxe Jetstorm. So, yeah, it's the drone unit, but sometimes the drone can surpass the original. It's rare, but it can happen. And overall, yeah, this was just a really solid, nice figure. Now, if you prefer the original color scheme, it really could have been either or that went in here. This is mostly just to highlight a different character, if you can call a drone a character. I feel like I've ragged on the Maximals a little bit too much with this video because there are good Maximal toys in this toy line. I just tend to lean toward the Vehicons as my Transformer experience. Doesn't mean it was totally one-sided though. They came up with some extremely clever things sometimes on the Maximal side. Case in point, I love Night Viper. I absolutely love Night Viper. So the most impossible thing engineering-wise that we thought of at the time was transforming a snake into a robot. Now, obviously, Takara did it in Beast Wars 2, and I really like Karada as well. But it's fun that they hit on the exact same idea, that a King Cobra with its big hood is what gave them enough bulk to actually make a working Transformer out of. I do like the color schemes on here. I do, the grays and the blacks work. It's not like overdone the way a lot of Beast Machines toys can be. I do like the giant like sickle weapons that can fold out from his arm kibble. That makes me okay with having the junk hanging off the arm. The most fascinating thing with this toy is the way that it transforms, with the midsection, the lower legs, literally snaking through the pelvis in order to create the main tail of the snake. Is it the most anatomically accurate snake? No, it is not. But it is a $5 toy from the year 2000, and it is a strangely great accomplishment for a Transformer. So I'm willing to give it a pass, if only for the novelty of it. And in a way, like, it's really like debatable whether Hasbro and their Night Viper did it better than Takara's Karada or not. That's for your decision. However, I do think both are really ambitious and really clever toys, and this one has one of the most unique transformation tricks I've ever seen in a Transformer to this day. The show cast puts in the work too from time to time. It does feel like because they're on the show, we can scrutinize them a lot more for what they look like because it's not what we expect. It's not how they look in the show. But every now and then they did produce a figure that was fairly close to how it looked on screen. And in one case, they did it very early in the series. So let's talk Black Arachnia. I think this toy is severely underrated. Out of all the spider Transformers we have gotten, I genuinely think this is up there in like top 2, right up there with like Transmetal Tarantulas as far as just how well this was pulled off. It's a big lanky figure, which is appropriate for Black Arachnia. It does a decent job with the spider kibble. It ends up pretty much where you would expect, in that you see it. I don't have to spell it out for you. You see it. But the toy itself actually does come close to a lot of her features from the show, including like the multi-eye thing across her forehead. The only thing that really held the toy back is the fact that the color scheme leans more to purple rather than the maroon and pinkish hues that she had in the series. But beyond that, it's actually one of the closest figures to screen accurate there is, and even the spider mode is a pretty enjoyable beast. It's a really nice toy all the way around, and I believe it is why the Takara version, which actually corrected the colors, is a ridiculously expensive toy to buy right now. Crazy expensive. But for what it is, yes, I do think this is one of the best Maximals in Beast Machines, and it's surprising that it's one of the year 1 early figures at that. Really underrated. If you ever have a chance, mess with it. It's a fun toy. If you know the Beast Machines toy line, then number 1 should be pretty obvious. And no, it's not a Cheetor. I feel like every Cheetor in that toy line had some problem or another that would have kept him off of this list. No, there is one toy in particular that I think everyone universally agreed, yeah, this is actually a really solid toy, and it actually looks like he does on the show. That's Blast Punch Optimus Primal. So, you get in your blasting punch gimmick. Okay, fine. You get in a decent level of articulation for something that has to be that bulk in the arms. Okay, cool. You work in enough of a transformation to make a gorilla toy just kind of interesting. And then you go and make it as screen accurate as we've ever seen Optimus Primal at that point. The closest you're going to get after that is going to be the Air Attack, which was canceled for this toy line, and it would take a few repaints down the line in order for it to actually get to the point where you could go, right, that might actually be the definitive Optimus Primal for Beast Machines. But for a lot of people, it's going to be the Blast Punch. Aside from the fact that, yeah, it's a fun toy on its own, it had the benefit of coming out in year 2 and actually got to be a lot closer to how he looked in the show. And yeah, it's just a big, solid figure all on its own. I do believe, I think the reaction universally at the time was just like elation that they actually went back and redid it, because that's not something we ever had at the time. Keep in mind, this was 2000, this was 1999. You never had anyone go back and go, let's redo that toy because it didn't come out the way people wanted or the way we wanted. That never happened. This is the first time in the same series, they went, let's try it again and let's get it right this time. And guess what? They actually got it right. So, that is my list, my top 10 toys in Beast Machines. Now, to be fair, it's not a long toy line, so there's not a whole lot for me to pick through. And admittedly, I didn't get every single Beast Machines toy, so maybe GeckoBot isn't as horrible as he looks. Regardless of that, like, this is my opinion on what the top 10 are. If there's one you think I left out or one that I didn't really explore, let me know in the comments below. I'm always interested to see how wrong I was in lists like this. And just for clarification, I did try to be fair. I left out Hammer Strike, who I personally love, because I know it's just one that I have to personally like. So, yeah, I tried to be fair. So, let me know what you thought in the comments below. And as always, I will see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.